It's been the typical massive overhaul of the coaching staff with a head coaching transition. That's understandable and common. So in regards to the new hires that have come in recently on both sides of the football, can you kind of review that situation and your initial thoughts of who's coming on campus?
Yeah, so it's kind of been interesting because at first glance, when Kelly bolted for LSU and Freeman ended up getting the job, there wasn't really expected to be a lot of coaching turnover. A lot of the guys who wanted to be with Freeman or wanted to stay at Notre Dame, and so really the only guys that left were either fired or let go. And one guy, and Brian Polian, ended up following Brian Kelly to LSU. And so, but recently you've seen Mike Elston take the defensive line coach at Michigan, which is his alma mater, and I think it's a place that he's probably always wanted to be at on the coaching scene. So certainly not maybe a major surprise. He's also been passed over as a defensive coordinator or a possible defensive coordinator for Notre Dame now 4 times, if you really look at it. And, and then Lance Taylor, their running back coach and running game coordinator, took a promotion to be the offensive coordinator at Louisville. So certainly can't fault him for that. And I think that that's probably a feather in the cap for Notre Dame anyway. So, but yeah, just going to the guys that you mentioned, obviously Mike Elston leaves, Al Washington, the former linebacker coach at Ohio State, and actually I think coached with Freeman in some capacity when he was at Cincinnati, is going to take over the defensive line. At Notre Dame. I think that that's probably a better position for him. He played defensive line at the collegiate level, and I think professionally for a few years as well. And from everything I've heard, terrific recruiter, which Freeman is kind of hounded on that. He wants only guys that are going to be terrific recruiters on his staff. And like I mentioned, I think Al Washington moves into a better position coach role with Notre Dame. So obviously, without seeing any on-field results so far, I think that's a really good hire. Brian Mason also has the Cincinnati connection with Marcus Freeman. He takes over special teams. I think the big thing with him is that at one point he was the recruiting coordinator at Cincinnati. So you have certainly some recruiting ties there, and special teams coach. I mean, as great as it is, you probably want him to be a strong recruiter because that's probably going to be his biggest job. I think that there's a lot of coaches out there that can coach special teams, and again, not taking anything away from those coaches, but I think recruiting is probably the biggest thing there. And then you've landed. Let's see here, some of the other coaches that they've brought in. Still looking for a running back coach. Still looking for a defensive coordinator. Wide receivers coach. Completely forgot about Chauncey Stuckey. So that was kind of an interesting story. For the longest time, it looked like they were going to land Jamarcus Shepard from Purdue. He ended up taking the wide receivers coach and I think assistant head coaching job at Washington. And then they were also looking at Holman Wiggins at Alabama, which a lot of people kind of, right when you heard that name, you're like, why would he leave Alabama for Notre Dame? And ended up going with Chauncey Stuckey. From the looks of it, Shepard was kind of the leading candidate going into all the interviews. Stuckey just kind of blew them away in the interview process. A young coach who hasn't, I think Baylor was really his first opportunity to be a assistant coach or a position coach at the collegiate level. But has a history in the NFL as a player. Came well regarded by Tony Elliott and Dabo Swinney at Clemson. That's where he played, and I think he was a GA there for a few years as well before moving on to be the Baylor wide receiver coach. And I think he's just one of those guys that is really young, really exuberant, brights up the room, and players really attract to him. So I think he just kind of blew the staff away, and they weren't necessarily expecting it during the interview process. So he's the new wide receivers coach at Notre Dame. I think I pretty much hit him all there, Mark.